Sorry about that. All right, let's start. I'd like to welcome you to the live chat. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you want to be a better beekeeper. If this is your first time watching me, my name is Doug. I'm Doug the Bee Guy, and my whole purpose for this channel is to help you be a more extraordinary beekeeper, and hopefully you won't have some of the pitfalls that I've had. I've been beekeeping for 10 years. We have between 80 and 150 hives, depending on every year is different, depending on how we can get survive. And that's what this is all about, my experience and what works, what doesn't work, and hopefully it'll help you be a better beekeeper. And don't forget to click on the bell notification, that little bell symbol, and that'll notify you when I put up a new video or when I have a live stream like this. If you don't click on the bell, YouTube doesn't necessarily tell you when there's new. You just have to find it on your own. A lot of people don't know that, but that's kind of the way YouTube is, because some people have, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and they don't tell everybody when they put up a new video unless you click on that little bell. So with that, let's get into the training. We'll have some question and answers at the end. And if you have a question, just put it in the chat there. I haven't seen anybody chat yet, so I don't know if it's all working, but looks like it's working on my end. Who knows if it's working out in the world? And I've been testing this for a few days. Everything seems to be working out over here. So this is the top 5 reasons why your beehive will not survive. And of course, if you ask 20 beekeepers this question, they're all going to say something different. But this is kind of what I believe is the main thing that goes on in beehives, at least in North America. If you live in some other part of the world, you might have a different list. But we can all learn from this information, no matter what, no matter where we are, no matter how we're keeping bees. That's the whole point of this. Please post your comments and ask questions in this video below. I'll put it back up there so somebody can watch it later. If you're not on the live stream, you can watch it back and put your comments, and I'll try to get to your questions, and I'll post as much of an answer as I can. And if I don't have the answer, I'll try to give you a website or a video or somebody that knows the answer, because that's what this is all about. So let's just get into the training. The first reason that I believe that beehives do not survive is beekeeper error. And so basically everything that we're going to go over today is pretty much a beekeeper error, except for one thing. And it kind of is beekeeper error also, because you can prevent it, or well, you can't really prevent it, but you can actually look into the hives periodically and see what's going on. So, the days of putting your bees out there, throwing them in a box and letting them, replicate and do all that stuff like they used to do, they're kind of gone. And, we could have done that in the 20s or the 30s or the 40s and maybe even the 50s. But then, in the 60s and some of those years, we've had all kinds of problems, which we're going to talk about: mites, diseases, changes in the weather, changes in the way people are farming. All of that stuff has impacted the honeybees. But the problem is that you can't just say, well, I put bees in a box and they're going to work. It's still your fault, because they're your bees. They're your livestock. And that's kind of the thing. You're supposed to be taking care of them. So if they do die, it's your fault. And so that's just the way it is. I mean, I've had hundreds of hives die, and it's terrible. And, you try to do the best you can. Sometimes you get busy, you have other jobs, other things. You're not doing the things you're supposed to be doing. There are many things that you have to do for the bees. There are some that you should do. And then there's a few that you could. It's up to you. You decide whether you want to do it that way or not. But if you're not doing the shoulds and the musts, then obviously when they die, it's your fault. And that's the way it is. And, we've all had that happen to us. And you look into a hive and something happened and you're like, oh, I should have taken care of it. And you didn't. And that's all. So I believe the number one reason is beekeeper error. And there's only a few situations, where You know, let's see, like right now we got that worried about that big hurricane in Florida. You know, those people, those beekeepers down there, if their hives get flooded out or washed away, it's going to be terrible. Our prayers are with you. Hopefully everybody's praying for you guys down there. Obviously, that's out of their control. If a tree falls on your beehive and it opens it up in the middle of winter and you're not there to save it, you know, that's not your fault, obviously. But, you know, stuff that you can prevent is really the number one reason for hives to die. There's a lot that we can do to keep them surviving over the winter. All right, I'm going to switch screens here for a minute because I don't see anybody chatting or anything going on, so I don't know if anybody is alive out there. This is working. It says I have people watching, so that's a good thing. So I guess maybe they can't type. Maybe they're driving. Maybe they're doing something else. No problemo. All right. So let's get on with the second reason that beehives don't. All right, Andrew, I saw it. Thank you very much for that confirmation of life outside my little room here. Hello, Timmy17. All right, so number 2 is the big one, right? It really should be number 1, but I wanted to kind of umbrella everything with the beekeeper's fault because it's kind of, you know, this kind of obviously falls in this. If you're not treating for Varroa mites, then you're going to have problems. Now, I know it's all right, Joanna, you didn't really miss anything, and this is going to be, I'm going to put it up. I'm going to put it up later so you'll be able to watch it. You just kind of missed the intro. So if you're not treating for Varroa mites, it's a big problem because, especially in North America, because we have a bad infestation of Varroa mites here in North America. And if you're in, you know, Australia or somewhere you don't have mites, you know, God bless you. That's fantastic. You don't have to worry about that. But we do, and it's pretty much the number 1 killer of beehives. And you know, even if you're a treatment-free beekeeper and you don't want to treat, you should at least test your mite levels. And I'll be putting up a video in the next couple of days about how to do that. And there's plenty of videos out there and lots of information about, you know, taking the little cup of bees, shaking them in the alcohol, and then pouring out the alcohol and just looking at how many mites you have. A lot of people, and myself included, when I first started, were like, oh, I don't see the mites. I don't have mites. I'm sure my bees are fine. Those are the other guys have mites. Well, like I said, if you're in North America, you have mites. Most definitely you have them. You might not have enough to make your hive die, but they're in there. And they come from all the other hives that are around you, and they come from everywhere. And you really have to make sure that you do something about it. So since it's the number 1 reason, what you want to do is you want to do the mite wash. You want to see where your level is. You should really do it in the spring, again in the summer, and then in the fall, so you have like a baseline. You can kind of see what's happening. If that mite level is going up, then you probably should do some treating or do something else. There's a lot of things you can do. We'll talk about that in another live stream, or if somebody has questions after the fact here when I'm done, I'll be happy to talk about it. But the main thing is you have to do something for your mites. There's a lot of different treatments. There's hard chemical treatments, which I tend not to do. I don't really want to put pesticides in my hive, but you know, the commercial beekeepers, they do. They put Apivar and all those other ones in there, and they have to because they have 10,000 hives. They can't just like hope and pray that some other treatment that's marginal will work. They really need to make sure they knock those mites down in the spring and in the fall so that they have, you know, 10,000 hives in the spring to make money with. You know, there's some other treatments that are less harmful to the wax and things, like the oxalic acid is my favorite. It's the new one that everybody seems to be using. It's a little bit softer treatment. It doesn't collect in the wax. It does a very good job of killing the mites as long as you know how to use it. Formic acid is also another soft treatment. It's an organic acid. It works pretty well, but that one, you have to do it at the right time of the year. Oxalic acid also you have to do at the right time of the year. And then there's some of the, the soft treatments, the sugar shake and some of those other things, which, I'm not sure that they really work, but some people say they do. I've tried them in the past and I didn't have much success with them. Doesn't mean they don't work, just means that I'm not doing it the way it's supposed to be done, probably. So, all right. So definitely treat for varroa mites. Find out about varroa mites. If you're a new beekeeper and you have a couple of hives, it's not too late to do that right now. It's getting a little bit later in the fall, but there's still time to test and treat. If you do that mite wash thing that I said, you have like 15 or 20 mites in that little wash, you have to do something or a beehive will die this winter. If you just have a few, then you'll probably be okay. It depends on the breed of your bee. If they, if they're cleanly, if they're killing a little bit of the mites. There are some bees that will supposedly, clean the mites out. But the problem with the mites is that, right now the beehive's chugging along. You got quite a bit of bees. I live here in Northwest Indiana, which is kind of far north in the United States, but I still have brood, believe it or not, because I've been feeding my bees, and they're doing well. But as soon as the brood stops, and if there's mites in the cells, all of those mites that are in the cell, and there's usually 3 to 4 mites in each cell that's infested. Not every cell, because there's 6,000 cells on a frame. Not every cell is going to have mites, but a lot of them will. And so all those mites jump on the back of the bees when there's no more brood, and they start sucking the life out of them. So if you just have a few right now, and you think, oh, it's okay, but all of them that are in there, then they jump on them, and so then they kill just a few more bees than normal as fall and winter go on, and so that's what happens. So your cluster starts to shrink smaller and smaller and smaller, and then eventually it can't keep it warm enough. It can't make enough babies to get to spring, and it can't move up the hive and eat the honey because now it's too cold and it's not big enough. So all of those problems start with not dealing with the mites, and it's just, it's endless. You can think about all the different reasons that a hive dies, and most of them have to do with the varroa mites. All right, let's go to number 3. See if I can switch this, see if this is all working. Number 3 still sounds like number 2, but it's totally different. Catches a virus from the varroa mite. So it's still varroa mites killed your hive, but now it's different. Now it's not the mites sucking the life out of the bee. Now it's that they got a virus. So maybe they got the K-wing. Have you ever seen that? I was going to get some pictures for my live stream here, but I didn't have time. So look up K-wing. There's all kinds of great photos out there. Your bee wings will start looking like a K. They start getting deformed. It's called deformed wing virus or K virus. Different scientists call it different things. That's a virus that your bees get from being bit by the mites. So, you can get that, and your bees are weak, and they get a virus just like humans. If you've got the flu, and then, you're exposed to something else, you can get that. Or people that may have cancer. My father-in-law is surviving right now, but your immune system is destroyed by all the drugs they give you. You got to be really careful about all the stuff that you're exposed to, because you can easily get pneumonia and a bazillion other things that you wouldn't normally get if you had a good immune system. So that's kind of what happens to the bees. The varroa mites bite their exoskeleton, they puncture it, and now they've got an open wound in their back. Even if they get rid of the mite, or somehow maybe you do a small treatment and you get rid of some of them, powdered sugar or something, you get rid of half the mites, but that bee still has the hole in it, and he could get a virus. She actually, because most of them are she could get a virus and then pass that along around. So that's kind of the other thing. That's why I say, varroa mites are really the main cause of all of this stuff, because if the varroa didn't kill them by themselves, then they might get a virus. And I think there's 10 or 12 viruses that they can get from the varroa mite. The main ones that we see here are K-wing, deformed wing virus, or the parasitic virus. I think they used to call it the Israeli parasitic, not parasitic, paralysis virus because a scientist in Israel discovered it. But basically, your bees come out. You'll see them. They come out of the hive, and then the little bee is shaking. He's nervous, and it's jittering, and so basically it paralyzes the bee, and they can't fly out of the hive. They can't do anything, and they end up going out of the hive and dying right there in front of your hive. And I've actually seen this happen to my bees many years ago, and I didn't even know what it was back then. And I was like, "What's going on?" I thought they had like tracheal mites and all these other things that you can read about, which similar symptoms, but they don't usually do the vibrating when they have the tracheal mites. Usually they just go out and you can kind of tell that they can't breathe. But so catching a virus from the Varroa mite is very possible. There's another one called sac brood, which is a virus, and they get in there and it doesn't form. The larva doesn't form continuously, and you'll see these little brown larvae in the holes in the cells of your frames, and so that's called sac brood. And there's a bunch of them, but I'm not going to list them all because a lot of them are rare, and it depends on where you live. But the basic idea is that if you're not doing something about the Varroa mites, then you might have, something catching a virus from them, and it's not good. So we really need to make sure that we do something about the mites. All right, so let's go to number 4, excessive moisture. Excessive moisture is a big problem, especially depending on where you live. A lot of people think that, well, I'm just going to put my bees in a box, close them up, wrap them up with a big ball of insulation, and they're going to be fine. They're going to be warm. The problem with that is that this huge mass of bees is warm, and so they're creating moisture. Just like if you locked yourself in a closet and you breathe, when you exhale heat and moisture besides carbon dioxide, and so eventually there won't be any air left, and it's just all going to be moisture and CO2. Well, it's the same thing with the bees. They have CO2. A lot of CO2 comes out of the hives, a lot of moisture. If you've ever looked at your hives in the summertime, if you go out in the evening, you'll see all these mosquitoes trying to get in to the hive. And the reason is they see CO2, and that's why they chase you and they sting you, because they can see the CO2 coming out of your mouth, your eyes, and your skin. And so the bees are exhaling all the CO2 and all this heat and all this moisture. And if you seal them up, it's going to condense on the top of the beehive when it's cold, and then it drips on them, and they get wet, and they get cold, and they die. So there's a lot of ways to thwart the excessive moisture, and depending on where you live, there's different solutions. If you live like in the Pacific Northwest, somewhere where there's always rain, there's a lot of rain in the wintertime, it's a little harder because there's all kinds of moisture. If you live in a high desert area, it's a little easier. What I do is I have a top entrance. The top entrance seems to be a pretty good solution because the heat rises, and then there's a way for the heat to escape and the moisture to escape out of the hive. So if their bottom entrance gets blocked by snow or rain or a pile of dead bees because you have like half of your bees died but the rest are still alive, that moisture and the stuff from the decaying bees can still get out of the top of the hive with the top entrance. And that's what I found works pretty well for me. There's a lot of other things you can do. You can put some of that hemosote board. It's like cork board or something. You put it on the top of your hive, and it's a moisture absorbing board, and it'll absorb the moisture. You can put, a lot of people do straw or different things on top of the hive. They put maybe a queen excluder or something on the top of the hive, or a screen, and then they put all kinds of different stuff in there to absorb moisture. And there's tons and tons of different videos out there, or books that have solutions to that. But if you don't understand that excessive moisture is sorry, I didn't switch that. Excessive moisture is not the problem, then you're not even going to know what to look for. So it's a big problem. So most people think bees get cold. They don't really get cold. Bees get they get wet. So if they get wet, just like a human, if you're running around outside, the temperature is kind of chilly, you're fine. right, with a light jacket. But if you get wet, then you can get hypothermia. Well, that's exactly what happens to the bees. Once they get wet, they're toast. And so that's the main thing with the excessive moisture. You want to get it out of there as much as you can. You know, one of the problems that I used to have, I didn't even know it, is I didn't have telescopic covers on my hives. I just had like the flat covers that a lot of, they call them, I forget what they call them, but when the beehives are traveled around on trailers, that's the kind of hive tops I had because that's all the money I had, so I didn't make fancy tops. Well, the moisture was getting in because the lid had curled up and the bees didn't propolis it all the way, and so the rain was like getting in on the sides and it was collecting inside there. And I had my beehives tilted the right way. So there's all these things that you gotta pay attention to. Now I have telescopic covers. I don't have that problem. The moisture doesn't get in that way. Now I just have to worry about the moisture that the bees are producing, and not rain and some other things getting in there. All right. I can hear you. I'm glad you love bees. How do you say your name? Quick KCWC. It's always interesting to see the names that people pick. All right. So number 5 is another big one. Starvation. This is another big killer of bees. So a lot of people are like, well, all these natural beekeepers are out there saying, don't feed your bees, whatever. It's going to teach them that they don't need to go outside to get food and all this stuff. And I just totally disagree with that. And basically, you know, if you have cows and pigs and chickens and cats and dogs, do you feed them? And we have chickens, and we have about 70 chickens. We have 8 cats, and we feed them. We feed them a lot. And so same with your bees. You need to feed them. You know, a lot of people will just feed their bees when they first get the package, which is obviously you have to do that. You feed them, and then to type to communicate. So let's see. What was I saying? Sorry. You have to feed them, and you feed them sugar water, and they build that first comb, you know, when you first get the package. But there's other times to feed your bees, like depending on where you live in the world, if you have what's called a dearth, where there's no pollen or no nectar coming in for a substantial amount of time, then you need to feed your bees because they might not be able to go for that length of time without eating. Maybe you're in a part of the world where they didn't really have bees, and there wasn't, you know, bees can migrate, you know, they move around, they swarm, they do different things. And so maybe in the natural world, they would move at that time of the year. And you're putting them in a place that's not really meant for them. And so you need to feed them. You need to feed them protein. You need to feed them sugar water for their carbohydrates. And it makes a huge difference in the bees' population and their health, and all kinds of different things that happens to the bees. So hopefully you won't open your hive in the spring and look in there and see that the bees have moved all the way to the top. There's no honey left, and they starved. So typically what happens for starvation is there's several things. One is that you don't let them keep enough of their honey. So, you know, the whole idea behind having bees is that you want to take some honey, right? Not everybody does, but most people, they want to take honey. They're either selling it like I am, or they're just taking it for their personal use and giving it away as gifts. But, you know, most people that have bees want to take some honey, but you can't take all of it. You know, they make surplus honey. You take some of it, but you need to leave them some so that they can overwinter. Depends on where you live in the world, how much they're going to need to eat. But if you take all of it, they're going to starve. The other thing that happens is maybe you have a year where they don't make enough honey. That doesn't usually happen in where I live, but there are a lot of places in the world that they don't make enough. You have a bad drought, have too much rain, a lot of different weather conditions. You have a very short season for honey flow, and then you have bad weather during that part of the year. They might not make enough honey, so you need to feed them the sugar water then, so that they can build up those stores, and then they'll have something to eat over winter. And so if you don't do that, same thing will happen. They'll eat all the honey that they made, which isn't enough for them to survive. They'll get to the top, and then they'll run out, and you'll see in the spring, you'll see their little heads stuck in all the cells, and they'll be dead in a tight cluster, and that's starvation. And it's happened to me. There was times when I didn't get, I was too busy with work, and I didn't get out to feed the bees. I didn't check all my hives. There are years when I have a lot of hives, and sometimes I spot check them. I didn't check a certain one, and it was too light for whatever reason. Maybe it got robbed. Maybe it needed a new queen, whatever, and I didn't get to it, and so it didn't have enough stores. So starvation is a big deal. All right. Hello, Pedro. Nice to see you. Glad you could stop by. That's kind of the top 5, and instead of doing the very first one that I did where I said Beekeeper Error, I was actually going to say Queenlessness, because that kind of is one of the only things that is not our fault as a beekeeper. Obviously, if you squish the queen when you're trying to mark her, which I've done actually, that's why I did the video on the one-handed queen catcher, because it's kind of hard to mark the queens without hurting them. But unless you do something to your queen on purpose or by accident, queenlessness is not really a beekeeper's fault kind of thing, but it is one of the top reasons that the beehives will fail. But the way to get around that is that you need to go into your hives at least every 14 days during the summer and check to make sure that your queen is laying eggs. So if you do that and the queen doesn't survive for some reason, or she got crushed when you put a frame in, or they decided they didn't like her and they tried to supersede her but it didn't work, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on now with the queens and the way and the quality of them and stuff, and it's not as wonderful as it was in the old days. There's a lot of times that your queen will not be superseded properly, or in my case, like I'll go in my hives and I want to get rid of all the queen cells because I don't want them swarming, because I want to make a lot of honey. But well, they might have already swarmed it. I didn't check it properly, and then I get rid of all the cells, and then I've got a queenless hive, which is fine. It happens a lot, but as long as you go back to your hive every 14 days or so, you'll be able to see that and go, oh, there's no eggs, there's no brood, there's no larva. I need a queen. So then you can get another queen. Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Hopefully you get into beekeeping, because we would love to have you. We need more beekeepers all over the world. Sorry, I was responding to a comment. I don't know how to say the name. Simi17. All right. See if this is working. I think it is. I've got quite a few comments already, so that's good. Thank you for that, Andrew. It's kind of stressful getting all this stuff going on. How's the lighting look? I got some lights here. It looks pretty good. It's really dark out, and I don't know what this camera looks like because I can't see the live feed. All I can see is what my computer, it looks like it's working just fine. I don't have a high-tech setup. I just have a simple computer with a webcam. Someday maybe I'll have a fancy camera and stuff like that. But right now we're just trying to get the information out and see what happens with the live stream. Got quite a few videos planned. What happens with me is I film all the videos during the summer and then I edit them and try to get them up in the winter. Unfortunately, my other job is I own a kettle corn business in the summertime, and I'm just way too busy to like do videos, edit them, and get them up in the summertime. It's very frustrating, but someday maybe I'll have some assistance. And hopefully we don't have too much snow this winter, because my other job is snow plowing, and so if we get too much snow, then I don't have time to put them up in the winter, which is what happened last year. I have a lot of videos from last year and this year that need to be edited, and I didn't get them up. And a lot of people were texting me and saying, when are you going to put some more videos up? And I'm just like, you know, last year I had 40 days straight of snow that I had to plow, and I just couldn't get off work. So that's what happens. Life. Let's see what Joanna has to say. She said, what would you recommend to treat for Varroa on a tight budget? Tight budget. Well, I would say a tight budget, the cheapest thing to do is oxalic acid. So it's literally pennies to treat your bees. Now, you do have to have a method to vaporize it. to sublimate it. But if you have a bee group or a bee club, or find somebody that's close to you that has one of those devices already, that's really the cheapest way to do it. It's literally, you buy a 5-pound bag of oxalic acid for $30. So each little spoonful is, we're talking pennies. If you don't have access to that, then formic acid is not that expensive either. It's a couple dollars for the treatment. The problem is you usually can't just buy one. You can't just buy one formic acid pad. I don't believe you have to buy them in packages of 10. So again, if you're close to somebody that has another hive or something like that, maybe you could split it with them. Those are not that expensive. As far as natural treatments that you could just do, with very little money, I don't like the powdered sugar thing. I'm not going to recommend that because I've done it and I don't think it works. And then you end up getting sugar all over your bees. A lot of people say it works, but so you could try it. It's cheap. Buy some powdered sugar, a couple dollars at the store, sift it on them. Supposedly when it gets on the mites, they fall down into the bottom, and then the bees obviously just eat the sugar off themselves. But you got to watch, because as it's getting colder right now this time of year, you got to be careful that it's not too cold. I don't know where you live in the world or in the country, but like we just had 85 degrees yesterday, and now all of a sudden it's 49 today, and it's probably going to be like that for the duration. I don't think we're going to get any more warm weather. So stuff like that, you got to kind of be careful with. Let's see, what does Pedro say? When a queen dies, the workers that make another one, how does it work? Well, when the queen dies, there's always some eggs in the hive, and what they do is they pick one that's less than 3 days old, and they start feeding it royal jelly. So what determines a queen is how much royal jelly she's fed. A queen is exactly the same genetically as any of the other female worker bees, except that she was fed royal jelly for 4 more days than the normal workers. The normal workers are fed royal jelly for 3 days, and the queen is fed royal jelly for 7 days. What happens on day 4, 5, 6, and 7 is somehow there's a genetic switch that is switched, and then she becomes a queen with functioning ovaries. Your worker, other female bees have ovaries, but they don't function, and so that's the difference. And that's why they're a little bit bigger. Their abdomen is a little bit bigger. They're able to go out and mate. So they have just a little bit different physiology, and it's really just because of the royal jelly. And it's pretty amazing that that's just the only difference. There's not a different egg. It's all the same. You can literally take eggs, random eggs, put them in another hive, make the bees feed them royal jelly, and they'll all turn into queens. And that's how they raise queens. So interesting. All right. What is the difference between regular honey and royal jelly? Well, regular honey is honey that the bees make honey from nectar, and they evaporate all the moisture out of the honey, and then or out of the nectar, and then it becomes honey. So honey is basically nectar that has 17% moisture in it. Royal jelly is a totally different substance. It's not clear like honey or translucent. It's white, and it's a fatty protein substance that it has a lot of amino acids in it, and a lot of times the bees, they produce it in their head. Actually, the nurse bees produce it in their I don't know how to say the word, but it's their fat glands basically that's in their head. And that's another reason why you should feed your bees, especially in the fall, like protein patties and other things. So what happens is those bees bulk up. So you might not be raising any brood right now, but if you feed your bees and you get them kind of fat, literally, they have all that fat stored in their cells up here, so that in the spring they can now make royal jelly and feed all of the little bees the royal jelly. So that's the difference. Honey and royal jelly are not the same thing, and so hopefully that clarified that a little bit. Anybody else have any questions? Ooh, Andrew, nice job. All right. Anybody else have anything to say? Because I'm happy to answer any questions, but hopefully you enjoyed this. Yeah, thanks, Pedro. Sorry about that. It's my analytical brain going there. So again, thanks a lot for watching. Again, if you want to subscribe to this channel and like this video so that some other people can see it and maybe they'll learn something about how to keep their bees from dying. That's kind of the main idea of this video, is just to help understand there's a lot of main reasons why your bees will die, and most of it is our fault. And hopefully people will take heed of that, and they'll prevent their bees from dying. If you want to be notified by the next live stream or the next video that I put up, make sure that you click on the notification bell, because otherwise you won't be notified, because like I said before, YouTube does not notify everybody. Just because you're subscribed to my channel doesn't mean you'll be notified. Let's see. Well, I'm glad you guys enjoyed the live stream. Like I said, it was my first one. I had some things that I forgot to do, but hopefully they'll get better, and we'll all learn together. So thank you very much.